I was debugging the authentication system that kept our biggest clients' data secure when the email hit my inbox at 4:23 p.m. Pacific time. Subject line, employment status update, immediate action required. You know that sinking feeling when you're about to get life-changing bad news? Yeah, that was me staring at my computer screen in our San Jose office. The email was 4 sentences long. 13 years of my life reduced to corporate speak that could have been copy-pasted from a template. Dear Mr. Brennan, after careful consideration, we have decided that your services are no longer required at TechCore Systems. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Please return all company property to HR by end of business today. Thank you for your contributions. That was it. No phone call, no face-to-face meeting, no explanation. Just a digital pink slip delivered with all the warmth of a parking ticket. My name's Roy Brennan, and I'm 45 years old. At that moment, sitting in my cubicle, watching my coworkers type away, completely unaware that I had just become a ghost in the building, I thought my career was over. 13 years I'd been the backbone of TechCore's infrastructure. The distributed caching algorithms I'd built from scratch handled peak loads that would crash our competitors' platforms. Netflix's entire holiday streaming traffic ran on code I'd written at 2 a.m. while my family slept upstairs. Growing up in Cleveland, my dad worked at the steel mill for 36 years. Mom cleaned houses for wealthy families in Shaker Heights. We shopped at Kmart and considered Olive Garden a special occasion. Dad always said, "Son, there's two kinds of people in this world, those who build things and those who just talk about building things. Be a builder." I remember him coming home with steel dust in his hair, hands cracked from the cold, but he never complained. He'd sit at our kitchen table after dinner, helping me with math homework, saying things like, "Numbers don't lie, son. Neither should the people who work with them." I never had the luxury of a computer science degree from some fancy school. What I had was discipline and too many late nights teaching myself Python, Java, and C++, while my high school buddies were out partying. Dad bought me my first computer from a pawn shop when I was 16, an old Gateway that took forever to boot up. "You're gonna do something with this machine that matters," he told me. Something that lasts longer than what we build in the mill. I'd been the foundation of TechCore's infrastructure for over a decade. The security protocols I'd designed had prevented 4 major breaches in the past year alone, attacks that would have cost TechCore over $95 million in client compensation and regulatory fines. When Goldman Sachs needed their trading platform to handle Black Friday volumes, they licensed my load balancing algorithms. When Airbnb's booking system crashed during peak summer season 2 years ago, they called me directly to consult on the fix. While Preston Wade and his executive team sat in their glass offices talking about synergy and disruption, I was in the trenches building the actual foundation that kept their $1 billion valuation from crumbling. Preston was everything I wasn't. At 51, he was pure Silicon Valley royalty. Yale MBA, connected family. The kind of guy who name-dropped his weekend golf games with venture capitalists like they were old drinking buddies. He drove a Tesla Model S Plaid, lived in a $8 million house in Los Altos Hills, and had that particular tech executive swagger that comes from never having to worry about a mortgage payment. But here's what really got me. Preston's idea of technical leadership was forwarding TechCrunch articles with subject lines like thoughts. He'd once asked our security team if we could make the encryption more streamlined because it was slowing down the user experience. Last month, he'd spent $600,000 on consulting firms to explain basic cloud architecture to the board, concepts I could teach to a high schooler over lunch. The financial pressure at 45 was crushing in ways my younger self never understood. We had a $720,000 mortgage on our 4-bedroom house in Mountain View. My dad's medical bills from his heart surgery last year were still coming in. $28,000 even after insurance. Tyler was 15 and already talking about Stanford like his old man. Every time I looked at my kid, I saw my dad's hopes reflected back at me, except Tyler actually had a shot at the opportunities I never did. Megan was 12 and wanted to go to summer camp with her friends from school. Just last week she'd asked me, "Dad, why do you always look worried about money?" I didn't know how to explain to a 12-year-old that Daddy's job security wasn't what it used to be, that companies these days threw away 45-year-old engineers like used tissues. The doctor had been warning me about my blood pressure for months. He'd actually written recommend immediate stress management on my chart, which was medical speak for this job is killing you. I'd started having chest pains during particularly stressful weeks. the kind that made me wonder if I was going to end up like my dad, working myself into an early grave for companies that wouldn't remember my name 6 months after I was gone. That dedication came with a brutal price. I'd missed Tyler's championship baseball game last spring because a coordinated attack had brought down our servers during peak business hours. Tyler had pitched 7 innings, his best game of the season, and I wasn't there to see it. When I got home that night, he just shrugged and said, "It's okay, Dad. I know work's important." That shrug hurt more than any criticism would have. I'd skipped Megan's piano recital in December when a major client threatened to pull their $15 million contract over a security vulnerability I had to patch. Jenny, my wife, had stopped asking when I'd be home for dinner. She'd just make my plate and leave it in the microwave with notes like Tyler's game tomorrow at 3 or Megan's recital Thursday. For years, my relationship with Preston was professionally cordial. He'd nod approvingly during my quarterly presentations, occasionally throwing out phrases like "excellent work, Roy," or "this is exactly the kind of innovation that sets us apart." I thought we had mutual respect. I thought my dedication meant something to him. Man, was I wrong about that. The warning signs had been there for weeks, but when you're focused on keeping servers running and preventing million-dollar security breaches, you miss the office politics. Sarah from HR had stopped making eye contact during our Monday meetings. The usual Friday beer runs had mysteriously excluded me. Even my direct reports seemed nervous when I asked about their weekend plans. Carlos escorted me out that Friday evening. The security guard who'd worked there almost as long as me looked genuinely confused. We'd talked every morning for years about his son's soccer league and his wife's nursing program at San Jose State. "See you Monday, Mr. Brennan," he called out, not knowing that Monday would be very different for both of us. "See you around, Carlos," I replied, not having the heart to explain that everything was about to change. The drive home was a blur of Highway 101 traffic and classic rock from the local station. I kept the radio loud to drown out the questions spinning in my head. Why now? What had I done wrong? Was this really just about cost cutting, or was there something bigger happening that I'd missed? At 45, you start wondering if you're too old to bounce back from something like this. The mortgage doesn't care about your pride, and college tuition deadlines don't wait for you to figure things out. That evening, I did what any reasonable person does when their world implodes. I ordered pizza from our local place, cracked open a beer, and tried to make sense of it all. Jenny found me on the couch around 9, laptop open, already scrolling through job listings on LinkedIn. The kids were upstairs doing homework, completely unaware that Daddy's steady paycheck had just disappeared. "How bad is it?" Jenny asked, settling down next to me with her own beer. She'd been working as a nurse at Stanford Medical for 10 years, so she knew how to read people's stress levels better than most. Plus, she'd seen me come home from enough crisis situations to know when I was really rattled. "Bad," I said, "no severance package mentioned. They just cut me loose after 13 years of keeping their entire platform running." I showed her the email on my phone. She read it twice, shaking her head. We'd been married for 18 years. She knew me well enough to see past the calm exterior to the anger building underneath. "There's got to be more to this story," she said. "Companies don't just fire their top engineers without reason, especially not the guy who built their entire infrastructure from the ground up." She was right, of course. There was more to the story. A lot more, I just didn't know it yet. That weekend, while Jenny took the kids to Tyler's baseball tournament, I started cleaning out my home office. I was going through old files, tossing expired warranties and outdated tax documents, when I found a folder labeled Patent Stuff 2020. Inside was an email from Dr. Alan Pierce that I'd completely forgotten about. Dr. Pierce had been my computer science professor at Ohio State before moving to a small consulting firm in San Francisco. Back in 2020, he'd reached out after hearing about some innovative work I'd done on distributed computing architecture. The email subject line read "Patent Documentation. This is critical." "Roy," the message began, "what you've created here isn't just clever coding. It's a fundamental breakthrough in how distributed systems communicate. This algorithm doesn't just synchronize data. It predicts optimal server loads 18 seconds before peak demand hits, preventing crashes that cost companies millions. File the paperwork. Trust me on this. Big companies have a way of forgetting where their best ideas actually came from." My hands were shaking as I read those words again. I remembered dismissing his urgency back then. TechCore Systems was my employer. Anything I created belonged to them, right? But Dr. Pierce had been insistent. He'd even connected me with a patent attorney, Lisa Kane, who specialized in software patents and had a small practice in downtown San Jose. I'd resisted at first. The whole thing seemed like unnecessary paranoia. But Dr. Pierce kept pushing. You remember what your dad taught you about building things that last? He'd said during one of our phone calls, well, this is how you build legal protection that lasts. Companies will use you up and throw you away, but they can't touch what's legally yours. The patent had been approved in late 2020, System and Method for Predictive Load Distribution in Cloud Computing Environments. Patent number US 11,892,431. Filed under my name alone, Roy Brennan, sole inventor. $18,000 from Tyler's College Fund and a credit union loan. Jenny had trusted my judgment, even when I couldn't fully explain why it mattered. It's like insurance, I'd told her back then. Hopefully we'll never need it, but if something goes wrong, we'll be glad we have it. Little did I know how prophetic those words would turn out to be. I pulled up the USPTO database with trembling fingers. Please still be active. Please still be mine. There it was, still valid, nearly 16 more years remaining on its 20-year term. Then I cross-referenced it with TechCore's internal documentation. What I found made my blood run cold, then hot with something I hadn't felt in years. My algorithm wasn't just powering TechCore's platform. It was TechCore's platform. Every transaction, every client success story, every dollar of their $2. $1 billion valuation depended on code I owned. According to their own SEC filings, my patented technology generated 79% of TechCore's revenue. I sat back in my kitchen chair and started laughing. Actually laughing, loud enough that Jenny came downstairs when she got home with the kids. Roy, you okay? She had that concerned nurse voice she used when checking on patients. Honey, come look at this. I spread the patent documents across our kitchen table next to TechCore's revenue reports I'd pulled from their investor relations site. She studied the papers, her nurse's training making her good at analyzing complex information quickly. So let me get this straight. They fired you for being unnecessary? That's right. And this technology you own generates how much of their revenue? 79%. Jenny looked up from the documents and smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. Preston Wade is about to have a very bad year. Monday morning, I drove to Lisa Kane's office in downtown San Jose. She was in her late 40s, a former big law attorney who'd gone solo after getting tired of partnership politics at firms like Wilson and Associates. Her office was small but organized, with law books stacked everywhere and a coffee maker that looked like it got more use than her printer. Roy Brennan, she said, recognizing me immediately. I was wondering when you'd call. Lisa, I need to understand exactly what I'm sitting on here. We spent 2 hours going through every detail. TechCore had been using my patented technology for nearly 4 years without any licensing agreement. They'd simply assumed employee work belonged to them. My 2011 employment contract contained zero language about patent assignment, something I'd been too trusting to notice back then, but Dr. Pierce had insisted I verify when filing. Every day they use your technology without authorization, they're committing willful patent infringement, Lisa explained. But here's where it gets interesting. TechCore is in advanced merger talks with Meridian Systems. $890 million deal supposed to close mid-year. What happens when Meridian discovers TechCore doesn't own their core technology? The deal dies instantly. No board would approve acquiring a company facing potential patent litigation worth hundreds of millions. That afternoon, I called Dr. Pierce. Roy, I've been waiting for this call for 4 years, he said immediately. You remember what I told you about documentation? You said companies forget where their ideas come from. They don't just forget, they convince themselves they never needed you in the first place. Preston Wade is about to learn that lesson the hard way. What's your plan? I'd been thinking about that all day. I have 2 choices. Call Preston and negotiate, or let him discover the truth during due diligence. The first gets you money. The second gets you justice. After 13 years of loyalty repaid with a form letter, justice felt a lot more satisfying. I spent the next few days researching Preston Wade himself. His LinkedIn profile was a masterclass in nepotism, Daddy's connections to 3 different VC firms, board positions inherited through family networks, lateral moves between executive roles. The guy had never written a line of code in his life, never pulled an all-nighter debugging a critical system. While I was teaching myself advanced algorithms from MIT courseware at 2 a.m., Preston was probably at networking events talking about synergistic opportunities. Internal documents I accessed through former colleagues showed he'd hired external consultants 12 times in 2 years to explain basic technical concepts to the board. The consulting bills alone totaled over $600,000. more than 4 times my annual salary. Meanwhile, I'd been doing the actual work for a fraction of what they were paying people to explain what I'd already built. The merger news was everywhere. TechCrunch called it transformative. The Wall Street Journal quoted Preston about pivotal moments. Forbes featured him on their disruptors to watch list. My former colleagues were posting excited LinkedIn updates, completely unaware their CEO's biggest deal was built on technology he didn't own. Something interesting happened during those days of waiting. My blood pressure started dropping to normal levels for the first time in months. I was sleeping better, actually spending time with Tyler and Megan instead of mentally debugging server issues. For the first time in years, I felt like I controlled my own destiny instead of being controlled by someone else's emergency. Tyler noticed the change first. "Dad, you seem different," he said one evening while we were throwing the ball in our backyard. "Less stressed out." I'd started making it to his practices again, something I hadn't done consistently in years. Watching him work on his curveball, I remembered my dad's advice about building things that last. This moment, right here, was more important than any server uptime metric. You know what, buddy? Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing. You'll understand that when you're older. He nodded like he got it, even though he was only 15. Smart kid. Definitely got that from his mother. Megan had been practicing piano more too, probably because I was actually home to hear her play. She'd started asking me to sit with her during practice sessions, something she'd stopped doing when my work schedule got crazy. "Play that one piece again," I'd tell her. "The one that sounds like rain." These were the moments I'd been missing while making Preston Wade rich. Lisa called Thursday afternoon. Meridian's legal team started their IP audit. Based on typical timelines, they'll discover your patent within 2 weeks. What happens then? Preston Wade has the worst day of his professional life. I thought about calling him, giving a heads up, working out licensing terms. But then I remembered that Friday email. 4 sentences. 13 years reduced to corporate boilerplate. Let them find it, I told Lisa. Let's see how far they get before Preston realizes he doesn't actually own his most valuable asset. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was helping Megan with her algebra homework. My phone showed an unknown number with a 408 area code. Classic Silicon Valley business line. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Roy, this is Preston Wade. We need to talk." "Now." His voice had lost all its usual executive polish. Gone was the smooth confidence that had charmed investors and intimidated competitors for years. He sounded like a man who'd just discovered his house was built on quicksand. "Hello, Preston. I'm surprised to hear from you. Last time we spoke, it was through a 4-sentence email. Cut the games, Roy. You know exactly why I'm calling. We just got the preliminary IP audit back from Meridian's legal team. There's an issue with patent US 11,892,431. I let the silence stretch while Megan worked through her equations. The irony wasn't lost on me, helping my daughter solve problems while Preston's world was falling apart. "I'm not sure what you mean, Preston. Could you be more specific? Don't play dumb with me. That algorithm is the foundation of our entire platform. Our clients process billions of transactions through that system daily. Netflix, Goldman Sachs, half the Fortune 500, they all depend on it. If there's some kind of ownership dispute, there's no dispute, Preston. The patent's very clear about who invented the technology and who owns it. Maybe you should have paid attention to who was actually building your company instead of hiring $600,000 worth of consultants to explain it to you." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear his breathing through the phone. Megan looked up from her homework, probably wondering why I was smiling. "Look, Roy, we can work something out. Maybe there was an oversight in the original employment paperwork. We can backdate a licensing agreement, make this problem disappear. What do you want? Stock options? A consulting contract? We're reasonable people here. Reasonable people don't fire loyal employees by email, Preston, and I'm not interested in backdating anything. That would be fraud, wouldn't it? Though I suppose fraud's probably just another Tuesday for you. Roy, you need to understand what you're doing here. This merger affects hundreds of jobs, thousands of clients, millions of users. You can't just blow up an $890 million deal because you're upset about being laid off." I looked at Megan, bent over her homework, completely absorbed in solving for X. 13 years I'd missed moments like this for Preston's company. 13 years of choosing his problems over my family. I'm not blowing up anything, Preston. I'm just a guy with a patent who got fired by email after building your entire infrastructure from scratch. What happens next is entirely up to you. Name your price. Seriously, whatever you want. What I wanted was respect after 13 years of making you rich. What I wanted was a phone call instead of a form letter. What I wanted was for you to remember that real people built the foundation you've been taking credit for. I hung up on Preston Wade that Tuesday night feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete control over my own destiny. Megan had finished her algebra by then and was packing up her books. "Dad, who was that man on the phone?" He sounded scared. "Just someone who's learning that actions have consequences, sweetheart." The next morning brought chaos. My phone rang 11 times before 9 a.m. Calls from TechCore's head of legal, their CTO, and what seemed like half the corporate law firms in Silicon Valley. I let them all go to voicemail and spent the morning at my local gym, working through a deadlift session that felt particularly satisfying. Amazing how much stronger you feel when you're not carrying other people's stress on your shoulders. The messages were increasingly desperate. Subject lines ranged from professional, urgent patent licensing discussion, to panicked, time-critical business matter, please respond immediately. The most interesting call came from Meridian's general counsel, Patricia Wong, a name I recognized from Forbes articles about high-stakes corporate litigation. "Mr. Brennan, this is Patricia Wong from Meridian Systems. I believe we need to have a conversation about patent US 11,892,431 and its implications for our pending acquisition. I'm hoping we can find a mutually beneficial resolution." Mutually beneficial. Corporate speak for "you have us over a barrel, please don't squeeze too hard." Preston showed up at my apartment complex Saturday morning. I watched him from my second-floor window, standing in the visitor parking lot next to his Tesla Model S. The car looked out of place among the Hondas and Toyotas, just like Preston looked out of place in his wrinkled $1,000 suit. He'd aged 5 years and 5 days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes looked slept in, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. The confident executive who'd delivered quarterly presentations with practiced ease was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely desperate. I debated whether to go down, but curiosity won out. "Roy, thank God," he said when I appeared. "We need to resolve this situation before it destroys everything." "Everything? Or just your merger?" "Look, I made mistakes. The layoffs were handled poorly. I should have called you personally, should have offered you a proper severance package, should have shown more respect for your contributions. But we can fix this." Watching Preston beg was something else. This was a man who'd wielded absolute power over my life just weeks ago, now standing in a suburban parking lot looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Preston, here's what's going to happen," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I'm going to license my patent to whoever wants to use it. Fair market rates, standard terms, no exclusivity agreements. If TechCore wants to continue using my technology, you can pay for it just like everyone else. But the merger, Meridian won't proceed without clean IP. Their board's meeting Monday to review the audit results. Sounds like you should have thought about that before you decided I was unnecessary. Roy, please, I know I screwed up, but think about all the people this affects. Sarah from accounting, Carlos the security guard, all the engineers on your old team. They don't deserve to lose their jobs because of my mistake. Funny how you care about other people's jobs now. Where was that concern when you were firing the guy who built your platform?" His shoulders sagged. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to remember that the people who actually build things matter more than the people who just talk about building things. And I want you to live with the knowledge that you destroyed your own company because you were too arrogant to respect the talent that made you successful." Preston's face went pale. "You're really going to let the merger die?" "I'm not letting anything die, Preston. You killed it the moment you sent that email. I'm just not resurrecting it for you." The news broke Monday afternoon. TechCrunch ran the headline, "TechCore Meridian merger collapses amid patent dispute." The Wall Street Journal was more direct. $890 million deal dies as cloud giant discovers it doesn't own key technology. Preston's statement was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. While we're disappointed that certain technical issues couldn't be resolved within the merger timeline, TechCore remains committed to our innovative cloud solutions and our valued clients. What he didn't mention was that TechCore's stock price had dropped 41% in after-hours trading, wiping out nearly $950 million in shareholder value. The company that had deemed me unnecessary was now facing potential bankruptcy if they couldn't secure a license to use their own core technology. Lisa called that evening with an update. TechCore's board called an emergency meeting. Word is they're voting on Preston's future tomorrow morning. And, let's just say updating his LinkedIn might not be Preston's biggest priority right now. Preston Wade was fired by TechCore's board on Thursday morning. The official statement cited strategic differences and failure to manage critical business relationships. They brought in Greg Murphy as interim CEO, the CFO who'd actually started as an engineer before moving into finance. Greg had been there since the early days and understood what it meant to build something from scratch. Greg called me that same afternoon. Unlike Preston's panicked desperation, Greg's approach was straightforward and professional. Roy, this is Greg Murphy. I'm sure you know I've just been named interim CEO. I'd like to discuss licensing terms for your patent. I'm listening. We both know TechCore can't survive without your technology. We're prepared to offer fair market value for a non-exclusive license, plus back pay for the 4 years we've been using it without authorization. What kind of numbers are we talking about? $100 million for the license, plus $40 million in back pay. Total of $100 to $40 million. I nearly dropped the phone. $140 million. For a patent I'd almost forgotten existed. That's substantial. Roy, I've reviewed your personnel file from top to bottom. I was there when you single-handedly saved us from that Christmas Eve server crash in 2018. I watched you prevent 4 major security breaches that would have killed us. Preston's handling of your termination was inexcusable. You built this company's foundation, and we should have recognized that years ago. That was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get from TechCore Systems. And honestly, it was enough. Within 3 weeks, I had 5 competing offers from major cloud providers who wanted to license my patent. Amazon Web Services led the pack with $62 million upfront, plus 18% royalties on all implementations. Google Cloud offered $55 million plus consulting contracts. Microsoft threw in partnership opportunities that would have made my old salary look like pocket change. The licensing agreement with TechCore was signed on a Tuesday morning in Lisa's modest downtown office. Greg Murphy signed for the company, looking relieved that they'd finally secured the rights to their own core technology. $140 million for a non-exclusive license to patent US $11,892,431. I used part of the settlement to pay off our mortgage that same day. Jenny actually cried when I told her we owned our house free and clear. No more worrying about layoffs, she said, hugging me in our kitchen. No more choosing between family time and someone else's emergency. The kids didn't fully understand what had happened, but they knew Daddy wasn't stressed about money anymore. My blood pressure at my next doctor's appointment was completely normal for the first time in years. Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it, doctor, Peterson said. 6 months later, doctor. Pierce called with a proposition. Roy, I've been thinking about coming out of retirement. What would you say to starting a consulting firm together? Focus on helping individual inventors protect their intellectual property. What would we call it? How about Pierce Brennan Patent Advisory? We opened our doors 3 months later in a renovated warehouse space in downtown San Jose. Our mission was simple: help working engineers and programmers understand their rights and protect their innovations before companies could exploit them. Being my own boss at 45 felt like something my dad would have been proud of. Building something that would last, something that mattered. Our first client was a brilliant young programmer from Detroit named Marcus Williams, who developed a revolutionary approach to machine learning optimization. He reminded me of myself at 25, talented, hardworking, and completely naive about the business side of technology. Here's the most important advice I can give you, I told him during our initial consultation. Always file the paperwork. Always protect your work. Document everything. Companies have a way of forgetting where their best ideas actually came from, but patents have long memories. The success stories started piling up. We helped a data scientist from Austin protect her breakthrough in fraud detection algorithms. A security engineer from Seattle secured rights to his authentication protocols before his startup could claim ownership. Each case reminded me why this work mattered, protecting the builders from the people who just talked about building. Preston Wade landed at a smaller firm 8 months later, with a significantly reduced title and a fraction of his previous salary. I heard through the Silicon Valley grapevine that he'd been essentially blacklisted from CEO positions at major tech companies. Word gets around when you mismanage a deal that badly. These days, I sleep well at night knowing that every line of code I write belongs to me until I decide otherwise. I coach Tyler's baseball team on weekends. He made varsity as a sophomore, and I haven't missed a single game. Jenny and I actually have dinner together most nights. Megan's piano recitals aren't optional anymore. They're the highlight of my week. Last month, Tyler asked me what I learned from the whole experience with TechCore. Well, buddy, I learned that loyalty's a two-way street. I learned that your work's worth more than you think it is. And I learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is getting fired. Really? Really? Because it forced me to value myself the way I should have all along. When young programmers ask me for career advice, I tell them the same thing, doctor. Pierce told me back in 2020, always have a plan B because corporations have a way of forgetting that their success stands on the shoulders of the people who actually build things. The patent expires in 2040. By then, Tyler will be in his 30s, maybe with kids of his own. Megan will be starting her career, hopefully in something she loves. And I'll be able to tell them that their college educations were paid for by their dad's refusal to be treated like he didn't matter. If you're out there grinding away at some company, building their dreams while neglecting your own, remember this story. Document your innovations. File the paperwork. Protect your work. Because companies will use you until you're empty, then toss you aside. But if you're smart, if you document your worth and protect your work, you can turn the tables when they least expect it. And if they ever fire you by email after years of loyal service, well, you'll be ready. That's worth more than all the stock options in Silicon Valley.